The Queen's
He's in this
exile
impossible
guards,
position,
royal
right?
guards,
Duty to
their
the crown
boots
on one
echoing like
side,
Judgment Day
fractures
through
in his
the
own
oak-paneled
family on the
council
other.
chamber at
Camilla
Windsor.
is seated beside him,
Queen Camilla,
and this is a woman who
face
spent
twisted in
decades
fury,
under public
is being
scrutiny
physically
to
removed,
finally claim the title of
escorted,
queen, so
dragged
she's
from
always
her
in
own
this
husband's
defensive
side.
posture, always
King
trying to
Charles
legitimize
sits
her
frozen,
standing.
pen
Across from
still
them is
hovering
Prince
over the
Edward,
documents that just
Duke of
shattered
Kent,
her world.
one of the most
A
steadfast
move
members
that
of the
nobody
royal family,
expected.
still
Not
grieving
even
his
the
wife
palace
nearly a year
insiders.
after her death.
Camilla's
And then
heels
Catherine is
scraped the
there,
ancient
Princess of
floorboards.
Wales, carrying
One
herself
final
with that signature
humiliating
grace she
protest.
always has. But
This is
everyone in that
treason!
room knows what she represents.
screams,
She's
voice
the future
cracking.
of the monarchy,
But the
and
doors
the public
slam
adores
shut
her.
behind
That's
her.
the dynamic going
in
in.
that
It's already
suffocating
tense
silence,
before
the
anyone
monarchy
says a word.
changes
Prince
forever.
Edward clears his
But the
throat
real
and
story
announces
isn't the
that the
removal
vast
itself.
majority of the Kent
It's the
family
secret letter from
patronages
the late
are being
Duchess of
transferred.
Kent,
Then he
dated
turns
3
to
days
Catherine and
before her
declares
death
she
in
will be the one
2018
to inherit
that
these
sealed Camilla's
responsibilities.
fate.
Now, Catherine does
A
exactly
yellowed
what you'd
parchment
expect.
pulled from a blue
She bows
velvet
her
box
head,
that
accepts
just
with
rewrote
deep
the
reverence for the
future of
wishes of the
crown.
deceased, doesn't make
Let's
a
go
scene,
back.
doesn't gloat,
3 hours
just receives
earlier.
it with the composure
The air
she's
in the
known
State
for.
Council
And that
chamber
right
is
there
thick with
is where
protocol and
Camilla's
old
reaction
money.
begins.
King
Her
Charles
gaze
presides
freezes, her
at the head
fingers
of the
tighten
long
against her
mahogany
skirt,
table,
and I think
his
this
face
is where we
etched
have
with
to
the weight
pause
of 1,000
and actually think about what's
unspoken
going through her
regrets.
mind.
Prince
Because it's
Edward,
not just
Duke of
about
Kent,
some charities
stands
changing
tall,
hands.
voice
To
steady
Camilla,
as he announces
every
the transfer of
significant
his
role
family's
handed to Catherine
decades-long
feels like
charitable
proof
patronages.
that her own
Not to
contributions
Camilla,
over the years
to
are being
Catherine,
disregarded.
Princess
She's
of
the
Wales.
highest-ranking royal
The Kent
lady
legacies,
technically,
over
and yet here
140
she is,
organizations,
watching
from
influence
military
flow
veterans
directly to
funds
her
to arts
daughter-in-law. The
foundations
report
spanning
says
150
envy and the
year
fear
lease
of
on
being
key
eclipsed
London
by the younger
properties.
generation
Legacies
started
of trust
consuming
worth
her,
millions
eroding
in
her
influence
usual
and
calculated
public
restraint.
goodwill.
And honestly,
Edward's words
that
land
tracks.
like a gavel.
Whether you agree with Camilla or not,
These
you can see
patronages
how that would
pass to the
sting.
Princess of Wales,
She glances at
as per
Charles,
my late
desperate for him
wife's
to
final
intervene or
wishes.
at least push back,
Camilla's
and she
knuckles
gets
whiten
nothing.
on the table edge.
Complete
Her
silence.
eyes narrow.
The king apparently
This is
already
no
knew about
simple
this
handover.
and approved
This is
it.
power
That's the moment
shifting
her suppressed
from the
fury
queen consort
hits the
to the
breaking
future
point.
queen.
So Camilla
A
stands
direct
up.
challenge
In the
to
middle
her
of the
status.
proceedings, her chair scrapes
Catherine
backward
sits
with this
composed,
jarring screech that
hands
shatters
folded,
the stillness
the
of the
picture
room.
of quiet
Every eye
dignity.
locks onto her.
No
Courtiers
triumph
are
in her
astonished.
expression.
Charles looks deeply
Just
troubled,
duty.
and Camilla's face is
same
pale, but
duty
her
that
eyes
saw
are
her at
blazing
the
with
Duchess of
defiant
Kent's
anger.
funeral
She
when
draws
others
herself
found
up to her
excuses.
full height, ready to
presence
challenge
that
the
spoke louder
decision,
than
and this
any
is where
press
the
release.
confrontation officially ignites.
Here's where it gets
now,
ugly.
what's interesting here is the
Camilla
description of her
interrupts,
physical
chair
state.
scraping
Her
back
chest
with a
is heaving
jarring
with
screech
shallow
that
breaths.
echoes off
She's
the
trying to
17th
control the
century
trembling of her
portraits.
lips, but the bloodshot
Fairness?
veins in her
After
eyes
everything I've
give her
sacrificed?
away. This isn't calculated
Her voice
political
rises
maneuvering
sharp as
anymore.
broken glass.
This is someone who feels
Years by
cornered and
Charles's
humiliated, and
Through
she's
the
not able to
scandals,
hide
the
it.
scrutiny,
She starts openly
and now
questioning
this
Prince Edward. The
sideline
report says
for
she
her.
didn't use vulgar language,
The room
but
freezes.
every word was
Palace
razor sharp
officials
and dripping
exchange
with
panicked
condemnation.
glances.
She
This
drills
is the
into the
breaking
concept
point.
of fairness,
Years of
listing her own
insecurity,
contributions
envy,
and years
and
of
the gnawing
service to the
fear of
crown,
obsolescence
demanding to know why the
exploding
Kent
in
family
one
legacies are being
uncontrolled
swept out of her
outburst.
hands
Camilla
and given to
pounds the
someone so
table
young.
once,
Her
twice.
gaze
I
sweeps
demand
across the room,
recognition.
trying to force
But
everyone
Prince
to
Edward doesn't
acknowledge the
flinch.
injustice.
He reaches into
And
the
look,
blue velvet box
I'm not
on the
saying
table,
Camilla handled
one
this well,
passed down
because
through
she absolutely
generations.
didn't, but you can hear
From
the
it,
argument
he
she's
draws
making.
the sealed
She's saying,
letter,
I've done the work, I've made the
handwritten,
sacrifices, I've earned my
authenticated.
place, and now
A
I'm being
private missive from
sidelined.
his late wife,
Whether
the
that's true or
Duchess,
not is a separate
expressing her
question, but that's
deepest
what she
wishes.
believes in that moment.
It wasn't
Prince
a political
Edward's
trap.
response is where things really
Edward
start
says,
to shift.
voice low,
He doesn't
but
match
razor
her
sharp.
energy at all. He remains
about who
motionless
showed
like
up.
an ancient
A
stone
year ago at
statue,
Catherine's
weathered
funeral,
hands clasped on the
Catherine showed
table,
up.
knuckles
Camilla
whitened
didn't.
slightly, but face completely composed.
words hang in
When
the
she
air
finally
like a
stops talking,
psychological death
he raises his head slowly and
Gasps
locks
ripple
eyes
through
with
the
her.
advisors.
His response is
Camilla's
essentially
face
that
drains of
he's
color,
not there to
then
distribute
floods with
power or
rage.
dispense favors.
Bloodshot
He's
veins
carrying out the
stand out
precise
on her neck.
final wishes
She
of his
lunges
late wife.
forward,
That's
demanding
it.
to see
That's
the
the whole
document,
justification.
accusing
And the
forgery,
contrast between
betrayal, a setup
Camilla's desperate
orchestrated
clinging to
behind
power
closed
and
doors.
Edward's absolute
This
loyalty to
wasn't
his
just about
deceased wife's
patronages.
command
This
is so
was about
stark
the
that nobody in the
of the
room
monarchy.
dares to breathe loudly or
The late
intervene.
Queen's
Even
spirit,
Charles just
her
purses
emphasis
his
on
lips,
duty,
his hand
discretion,
gripping his gold
and
fountain
earned
pen,
respect
torn between
hung
devotion
over
to his
every
wife
syllable.
and respect for his
Diana's legacy
cousin.
of
That's a
genuine
brutal
public
position for a
connection
king to
versus
be in,
calculated
presiding
appearances.
over a room where his wife is
Catherine
unraveling
embodied one.
and his cousin is
Camilla, in
calmly
that
dismantling her
moment, seemed to
arguments.
fracture the
Then,
other.
Edward delivers
King
what the
Charles
report
tries to
calls a
intervene,
fatal
voice
psychological
weary.
blow. He
Camilla,
brings up the
please.
funeral
This
of
is
the
not the
Duchess of
place.
Kent, Nearly a year
But the
ago,
hysteria
Camilla had
escalates.
used the sudden
She
decline in
accuses
health
Edward of
as an
undermining
excuse
the
to be
crown,
absent,
Charles of
leaving the
weakness,
Kent family to
Catherine
mourn
of
alone.
orchestrating a quiet
Edward
coup.
revives that
Documents
memory
from
right
the
there in
midnight
front of
audit
everyone,
reports,
exposing her past
uncovered
selfishness
only
and
weeks
indifference
earlier,
toward his
show
family.
the Kent family's
But he doesn't
quiet
stop at Camilla's
dissatisfaction
absence.
with Camilla's
He shifts
approach.
his gaze toward
Private letters
Catherine,
leaked
who's
from
been sitting
secure
in
vaults,
perfect dignified
detailing
silence
missed
the entire
engagements and
time,
fading
and he points
enthusiasm.
out that while the reigning queen
receipts
chose to
were
evade her
damning.
duty, it was
Catherine
Catherine
remained
who stepped
silent
forward,
through it
took
all,
Camilla's place,
composed
fulfilled the
grace
vital
against
rituals,
uncontrolled
led the funeral
fury,
procession,
a contrast
and
that
comforted the
cuts
grieving
deeper
family
than
with
any
absolute
shout.
sincerity. That
She had
detail
spent
is
months
devastating.
preparing,
It's not about
visiting the
titles or
organizations,
rank or who
meeting
married
the
whom.
trustees,
It's about who showed
honoring
up.
the
A
legacies
year
with the
ago,
quiet
Catherine showed up and
efficiency
Camilla
that
didn't,
defined her
and now that
post-recovery
contrast is being
public
laid
return.
bare before the most powerful
No
witnesses
fanfare,
in the realm.
just results.
Edward's words are basically a
Camilla sees
silent
eclipse,
proclamation
total
that
and
Catherine
humiliating.
deserves these legacies
Then
not just
comes the
because of a final
unthinkable.
wish, but
Camilla's
because she proved
outburst
her
turns
worthiness
physical.
through action.
She sweeps a
While
stack of
Camilla
dossiers off the
discarded
table,
that same
pages
opportunity
scattering
with
like
her own
fallen
hands.
leaves.
Camilla's face,
The
which
final
had been
violation of protocol
flushed
in a
with
room
anger,
built
suddenly
upon it.
turns deathly pale.
King
Her
Charles
lips move, but no
rises
words
slowly,
come out.
the weight of
She's
his
trapped
decision
herself in a
carving
corner
new
and she
lines
knows it.
into his face.
But Edward isn't finished.
Enough.
Before Camilla can
His
recover,
voice is steel.
he goes deeper into the
Guards.
final days of his late wife.
Two
He
royal
describes
protection
how the
officers step
Duchess
forward.
of Kent,
The same men
even as
sworn
her
to
breath
protect
grew
the Queen,
shallow on her
now
deathbed,
tasked
was
with
deeply
removing her.
anxious about the future
Camilla's
of the
eyes
charities,
widen
the
in
arts
shattered
organizations, the veterans
Charles,
she'd spent a
he
lifetime
wouldn't.
supporting. It was
But
in
he
those
does.
final moments
The
that
order
she
is
placed
given.
her absolute
Escorted
faith
from the
in
chamber,
Catherine.
her protests
Now, to anyone
echoing
listening,
down the corridor
rationally,
until the
this
heavy
is a
doors
dying woman's
seal the
sincere
council
wish.
in
But Camilla's
terrifyingly
mind,
hollow silence.
driven by envy and paranoia
that
at this
silence,
point,
Charles signs the
processes
formal
it
documents.
completely differently.
Section
She
4 of
refuses
the
to believe
updated
it's
Royal
genuine.
Household Act.
In her
formalized that
worldview,
afternoon.
this is a
The
sophisticated
transfer
piece
is
of theater.
complete.
She
The Kent
becomes convinced that the
patronages
Kent
everything from the Royal
family
Academy of
and
Music
Catherine
to veteran
formed a
support
covert
networks
alliance,
across 3 counties
weaponizing the
now
name of the
rest with
deceased
Catherine.
to engineer a
150-year
political trap
continuum of service
aimed at
redirected
dethroning
in
her.
one
Her suspicion
devastating
peaks,
stroke.
and she loses all
The palace
control
corridors
over her
buzz
physical
with
form.
shockwaves.
She shakes her
Insiders
head
whisper of emergency
repeatedly,
decrees
her
and
trembling
urgent
hands
damage
gripping
control.
the edge of the oak table
One
so hard
high-security
her
legal
knuckles
dossier
turn white.
prepared in advance
She glares at
outlines
Catherine
the
with
irreversible
absolute
nature of the
animosity,
move.
silently
No reversal
accusing her
possible
of
without
being a
fracturing the
deceitful
family
puppet
further.
master pulling strings to steal
Catherine
glory
rises
that rightfully
quietly.
belongs to the Queen.
No gloating.
Prince Edward doesn't
thanks
argue
Edward
with
with a
words
nod that
anymore.
speaks
He
volumes,
reaches into his
the
suit
respect of
jacket and
shared
pulls out an
duty.
envelope
Then
made
she
of
begins
parchment,
her
yellowed
new
with time but
responsibilities
preserved with
immediately.
immaculate care.
Calls
He
to
lays it on the
trustees,
table,
site
and the report
visits
says an
scheduled for the
invisible
following
weight
week.
seemed to press down
Public
on everyone
statements from the
watching. He opens
organizations
it
pour
and
in
presents
within
the
hours.
handwritten letter
Praise for her
bearing the
dedication,
signature
her
and official
presence,
wax
her
seal of the
alignment
late
with the late
Duchess of
Queen's
Kent.
values.
The pen strokes are
The
neat
people
but
see
somewhat
it.
unsteady
The
from severe
institutions
illness,
feel it.
clearly
A
documenting
new
every
chapter.
instruction and desire
Meanwhile,
to
Camilla
surrender her
retreats to her
entire
private
spiritual
apartments.
legacy to Catherine.
Isolated.
This is the death
The
blow.
humiliation
Camilla's
burns.
final arguments
Reports
disintegrate.
from palace
Every
staff
royal
speak
member in the
of
room,
shattered
including
ornaments,
Charles,
whispered phone
lets out a
calls
soft
late
sigh
into
of
the night.
acknowledgement.
Her
Upon seeing the
resentment,
handwriting
once
of the
hot
deceased,
fury,
Camilla
now
completely
transmutes
loses the
into
bare
something
minimum of
colder,
composure expected of a
chilling
matriarch.
malice.
Her ears
This
ring,
victory for
her heart
Catherine
hammers,
feels earned.
and the royal dignity she
Rooted in
spent so long
presence,
constructing
not position.
shatters. She feels
In
like
showing
a
up when it
condemned
mattered,
criminal at the
funerals,
gallows,
crises,
her greed and
quiet
selfishness
service,
exposed before the
defending
entire
the
court.
memory of the late
Her face
Queen against
contorts with
those who would
humiliation
treat
and
the
rage,
crown
her
as
breath coming in
personal
ragged
entitlement.
gasps, and she
But the battle
plunges
for the
into a
monarchy's
state of
soul,
total hysteria.
far
This
from
is where
over.
the scene
As we
becomes
speak,
genuinely
lawyers
unprecedented.
review the next phase.
In the middle of a council
Camilla's
chamber
allies
that
circle
has
in the
always been the
shadows.
sanctuary of
Midnight
rigorous royal
meetings in
protocol, the
undisclosed
Queen's choke
locations.
sobs ring
A
out,
subterranean
violating
war
every
brewing
diplomatic
beneath
code.
the
The
polished
tears
facade.
streaming down
What
Camilla's
secrets
face
does that
aren't from
blue
remorse
velvet
or
box
heartbreak.
still hold?
They're the fury of a
What
proud
other
woman
letters?
stripped of
What
her
other
weapons.
wishes from the past
She throws
might
her shoulders
surface
up,
next?
shaking violently,
Charles sits
and in a
alone now
hoarse
in the
voice
council
loudly
chamber,
condemns
staring
both
at the
Charles
signed
and Edward.
papers.
She accuses the
The pen
decision
heavy
of
in
being
his
a
hand.
blatant betrayal of a
He
wife who
defended
shared
duty
her
today.
husband's burdens,
But at
claiming
what
they're
cost to his
conspiring to
marriage?
defame tame her
to the
and
fragile
banish her into
peace
the
of the
dark
House of
corners of the
Windsor.
palace. The chamber
Catherine
plunges into
steps
chaos,
into the light of new
unprecedented in
influence,
contemporary history.
carrying
Courtiers
Diana's
sit on
legacy of
edge,
authentic
eyes darting
connection
between the
forward.
king and the hysterical
Camilla,
woman.
escorted
Nobody
out
knowing
in
how to
disgrace,
handle a dynastic
plots in the
fracture
dark.
exposed this rawly.
The guard's
Charles
footsteps
raises his
have
hand
faded,
several times,
but the echoes
gesturing
remain.
for Camilla to stop.
And the
His
next
gaze filled
confrontation.
with both
It's
severity
already
and
in
plea,
motion.
trying to
This
remind
is
her
far
of the
from
dignity
over.
expected of a
The
queen.
monarchy trembles
But
on the edge
Camilla,
of something
blinded by thirst for
unprecedented.
power and